first I wasn't really sure where to start. I just thought there are so many stories and so many things I could say, but Anna was very good with giving guidance for the types of things that she wanted.
Welcome to Heart with Anna. I am not Anna Jaworski, but I am your host today. My name is Amy M. Lee. I am a heart warrior and was born in 1974 with a heart defect. Today, I'm an author and publisher and have written 3 books about my mother's fight to save my life while fleeing Vietnam after the fall of Saigon and rebuilding a new one in America. I am honored to be your host today for today's show. Some of you may remember me from some of the episodes I've been on in the past. Most recently, I was on a program with Jenny Muscatel, and we were talking about the CHD magazine. Anna asked me to be the guest host today so we could talk to Megan Tones about their new book. And today's program is entitled The Heart of a Heart Warrior Book, coming soon. Anna, are you there?
I am. I'm so excited to have you on the program and as the guest host today, Amy.
Woohoo! Let me do an introduction. Anna Jaworski became part of the congenital heart defect, CHD, community when her child was born with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, HLHS. She looked for resources to learn about HLHS and unable to find anything suitable, she created and shared resources. Thus, the publishing company, Baby Hearts Press, was born. She has written several books for families and edited 2 books of essays, one written by heart dads and another written by heart moms, called The Heart of a Father and The Heart of a Mother, respectively. Megan will join us later, and Megan Tones has been on several Heart to Heart with Anna episodes over the years. She was born with a VSD and had a pulmonary banding operation at 4 months of age. She had 2 more surgeries as a child at age 5 and 10, and 1 surgery at age 25. Megan works as a researcher and likes to do creative things in her spare time, including sewing, writing, and painting. In 2018, Anna approached Megan about editing a 3rd book in the Heart of a series. The book would contain essays from adults in the congenital heart defect community. Nearly 4 years later, the book is almost complete. Megan and Anna are talking today about the journey that has been the heart of a heart warrior. Welcome to Heart with Anna. Anna.
That's so much fun. Okay, thank you, Amy. It is such a joy to be here with you and to hear you giving the bios. Oh my gosh, Megan, it has been 4 years. I can't believe it's been that long. I keep saying 3 years, but that just shows how old I am. It actually was 2018 when we started working on this. So yeah, thank you. It's so much fun to be able to talk about this because we see the end in sight, Amy, and you know what that's like. You know what it's like to have that first draft of the book done and to know, wait a minute, in a couple of months, I'm going to hold something in my hands that we birthed.
Yes, I'm so excited, and I can't wait to talk to you and Megan about it. So Anna, you came up with the idea for this 3rd book. Where did this idea come from?
This is the book I wish somebody would have handed to me when they told me your son has a congenital heart defect. Because what they told me was your child's not going to survive infancy. Take him home to love him for what little time he has left. And for my husband and me, that was not an option. We were willing to do anything we could to save our son. So if somebody would have said to me, Anna, things look really dismal right now, but look, here's a book from over 40 adults who have critical congenital heart defects and who made it to adulthood. I would have paid any amount of money for it, and I would have sat and just devoured it and had a lot more hope for my child than what I did with the grim diagnosis that I was given. But more specifically, I did put together The Heart of a Mother, mostly because of Jane Hunt. I hope you're listening, Jane. Jane is a friend of mine who also lives in Temple, Texas. And she told me that I needed to put together a book of essays by women to inspire heart moms. And it was because of her insistence that I do it, because I kept telling the same stories of hope and inspiration over and over again. She said, Anna, you have to put this into a book. So I did. And that was really, really exciting. But I realized while I was putting together The Heart of a Mother over 20 years ago, that, wait a minute, the dads have a story to share too. And So even before I was done with The Heart of a Mother, I knew someday I was going to have to put together The Heart of a Father. But at that time, my son was still very, very young. And then when The Heart of a Father came out, my child was a teenager. So all of this, I think, is just perfect timing because now my child is one of the authors in the book.
That's amazing. And as a heart warrior, I can say that I've read the 2 books that you mentioned, and it's really refreshing and also insightful as a heart warrior to know what my mom or my dad may have gone through. So sharing those stories has been very powerful. So thank you for having those books. So tell us a little bit about the first essays that you received for this 3rd book. What are they about?
The first essays that I received were from people who I loved, just like with The Heart of a Mother and The Heart of a Father. The first people I reached out to were people that I have known for a long time. So I was already familiar with their stories. That's been one of the beautiful things about putting together these anthologies is I have reached out often to people I know who have really inspiring stories. And I've asked them to tell me their stories. And in the writing of their stories, I have come to learn more things about them that I didn't even know. So the very first essay that I got where I had a heart warrior willing to go through the editing process with me was Laura Ryan. And many of my listeners will remember Laura. She's been on the show several times. She's been a guest host. She's a regular with Heart to Heart with Anna. And she actually talked about a body image experience that she had after she had an open heart surgery and how all of a sudden she became very self-conscious about her scar. And it's actually a beautiful story. I love Laura's story. She did something so beautiful. She's not a writer. Most of the people who wrote for the book are not professional writers, but she was willing to share her story with me and with the world. And she did such a good job of taking direction from me. So I am a developmental editor. And when she gave me her first essay, I could see so much potential. But we needed to work through some things. And I'm not just talking about grammatical things, but more about helping her to show her story and not just tell it. So instead of having somebody just preach it, to actually make us feel like we're right there with her. And we went through several rounds of editing. And this is what a generous person Laura is. She put in the group that we formed her essays to show people the process of revising and editing and how it can take your first concept and through the revision and editing process, how you can make it blossom and grow and turn into something completely different and totally beautiful. So I really appreciate it that she did that. Jenny Busta is also very important to me. Her dad wrote for The Heart of a Father. Her mother wrote for The Heart of a Mother. I just knew this book wouldn't be complete without us having something from Jenny herself. And she too went through that editing process with me, worked really hard on her essay to make it even better than it was when she first submitted it. And hers is about bullying, and her story is kind of horrifying. I think Megan, my co-editor, who will be talking with us in the second segment, I think she would have to agree that she had a very severe experience with bullying that we hope no other heart warrior has to go through. But bullying is a topic that comes up frequently on my program when I'm talking to older heart warriors. And by older, I mean anybody in their 30s or beyond. So those were 2 of the stories that I got early on. And there are just so many more, Amy, so many amazing stories.
Well, we can't wait, and we can't wait to see how many stories there are and to read all of those stories. And those warriors are, I would say, they're pretty brave already to share their work and let it go through that revision process because it's a painful process, right? And writing, you put all your heart into it and then it gets ripped up and redone several times before it's ready for publication. So definitely kudos to them. What was the experience like putting this book together that was different from the previous books in the series?
I'm so much older. I am so much older.
Wiser.
Oh my gosh, the whole publishing world has changed over the last 20 years. Facebook is out there. I was able to put notes on Facebook, and people I didn't even know wrote to me and said that they wanted to be part of the book, which also happened with the other two books. Thanks to Jane Hunt, we didn't have Facebook when we put together The Heart of a Mother, but we did have a Yahoo group that we belonged to. This is showing how old I am, Amy. We had a listserv, and we had Chin with Mona Barmish, and we had our Yahoo groups, and that's how I got the word out. Mostly it was word of mouth. Mostly it was heart moms who knew other heart moms and knew their stories and said, Anna, you have to have this mom. Then when it came to the heart of a father, it was a lot of the husbands that I reached out to because I knew those families and I had actually met in person. That was a really different experience. The Heart of a Mother really is a slice of the entire CHD community, all different socioeconomic levels, all different countries, all over the world. I mean, all different ages. Some of the heart moms are heart warriors, which is really cool. With the Heart of a Father, it was very different. I had fewer people who wanted to be part of the book, and the stories that they wanted to tell were very different. And then we've come into this one, and here I've been on this podcast for over 8 years. I've been in the community on Facebook and LinkedIn. And so I think the cadre of people and the people who knew me and knew what I was doing is a little bit different. And so, of course, I had my friends from decades of being part of this community who reached out to me and said, yes, I want to be part of this book. But what is so delightful is some of the people on Facebook who wanted to be part of this book. And it was really important to them because I already had these other two books out there. They knew that if I said I was going to do it, I was going to do it. Now, it may not be fast, but it would come together someday. And Becca Atherton was actually the first. Here I said Laura. Laura was the first one to work with me, but the first person who actually sent me a piece was Becca Atherton. Becca Atherton was very sick. She knew she was dying. When she found out I was doing this book, she wrote to me right away and told me she wanted to be part of the book and sent me some poetry, which is absolutely heartbreaking and beautiful at the same time. I think Megan would have to agree with that. In fact, we love her work so much that we decided to open the book with one of her poems. So I think that's what's a little bit different is now I think the community knows who I am and they wanted to really be part of this, but it wasn't as much me going to other people as it was them coming to me and saying, yes, please let me be part of this.
Home Tonight Forever by the Baby Blue Sound Collective.
I think what I love so much about this CD is that some of the songs were inspired by the patients.
Many listeners will understand many of the different songs and what they've been inspired by. Our new album will be available on iTunes, Amazon.com, Spotify.
I love the fact that the proceeds from this CD are actually going to help those with congenital heart defects.
Enjoy the music.
Home Tonight Forever. This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The opinions expressed in the podcast are not those of Hearts Unite the Globe, but of the hosts and guests, and are intended to spark discussion about issues pertaining to congenital heart disease or bereavement.
You are listening to Heart with Anna. If you have a question or comment that you would like addressed on our show, please send an email to Anna Jaworski at anna@hearttoheartwithanna.com. That's anna@hearttoheartwithanna.com. Now, back to Heart with Anna.
Now we have Megan joining the studio. Megan, you wrote for the book. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
I did, yes. Well, at first I wasn't really sure where to start. I just thought there are so many stories and so many things I could say, but Anna was very good with giving guidance for the types of things that she wanted. She wanted it to be more I guess, kind of like a slice of life about overcoming an obstacle or showing resilience. So the first things that my mind sort of went to was my congenital heart defect story, the surgeries I had, the surgery I had, particularly as an adult, that kind of completely derailed my life at the time. But in the end, what I decided to go with after several false starts was my story about when my husband and I went to Egypt, because that was really an example where we had to push and push to make that happen. You can read about that experience in the book, with getting the travel insurance and finding a guide who could deal with my requirements for the trip. And we went and we had an absolutely amazing time. And I remember at that time, a lot of people thought that we were just crazy for going to Egypt on a vacation, that we wouldn't make it back, that something horrible would happen to me or both of us. But none of those things happened at all, obviously. And you'll be able to read more about my climbing around inside pyramids and riding camels and all that sort of thing in the story. But I actually wrote a number of essays for the book in the end, because I was heavily involved with some of the little writers groups that we set up. So I had some other pieces that I'd done about some volunteer work, and there was another one I'd written about growing up and wearing a back brace for my scoliosis. So they're all, I guess, examples of things that I'd found either challenging or interesting in my life. And in terms of the writing process itself, I had a little bit of experience as a writer, but it's something I do find quite difficult in terms of having a good routine and daily practice of writing. That's not something I'm really good at. It's a bit like working out, really. The more you do it, the easier it becomes, and I guess the better you get at it. I remember I had this fantastic piece of advice one time from an author called Neil Gaiman. If you've ever seen a TV show called American Gods, he wrote the story and the book behind that series. But he said something like, writing is one word in front of the other. That's how you write a book, one word after the other. It's that easy and it's that hard. And that's exactly right. That's how you do it. So that was how I wrote my story, that, and just trying to do a lot of reading of that sort of genre, like biography and autobiography type stuff, memoirs, because up until that point, I mainly read fiction. So seeing other examples of that was really helpful. And also just trying to decide on a theme for the story. I think that was something that a number of the writers that I talked to had struggled with a bit. What should be the theme of their story? And I'll get into that more in some of the later questions.
That's wonderful. I love that you powered through word by word. And you're right, it's a hard thing, but when we start to read more, I think that naturally helps with the creative flow. And they say that the good writers are also the good readers, right? And so it sounds like you did exactly that to get through your essays, which is amazing. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the involvement of the book, and maybe you can give us a sneak peek of what to expect.
Sure. So for this book, I thought that it was really valuable having somebody like me involved from the perspective of actually living with CHD, because the essays were by people who live with CHD. So it's a book, I think, that, as Anna talked about previously with her experience of being a mother of a person with CHD, that these kinds of stories, if she'd had them when her child was little, it would have been really valuable and a source of hope for her to see somebody go through all these surgeries and grow up and do lots of different things with their lives. And I think for me, being involved in the editing and writing of this book, I saw its value when I thought back to being younger. It was more the days before we had internet and when internet was just dial-up, so it wasn't really very good. You go on the internet and it would be a big deal. Pages would take forever to load. It would take all day for a song to download, that kind of thing. So there wasn't really an online community for CHD that I was aware of, being a teenager and a young adult. And even growing up, I didn't really stay in contact with the other children I met at the hospital or that sort of thing. So I always just felt like the only person that I knew was CHD. And being an adult at my hospital, at least, you were just going to the general ward if something happened to you. So there'd be you who'd be, 20 or 30 or 40 years old, and everyone else would be 60 plus. So you'd still feel like the only person. And I think that's where this book really has value, that you see that there are other people out there, and our authors are aged from their early 20s to 60 plus. And you see all of these different things that people have done in their lives. So when we got the essays, we arranged them into different themes. So there's one about being active, there's one about motherhood, and there's one's about service to others. They're just all different sorts of stories. It's not just a book about, here's me and I have CHD and this is what it was like growing up. I mean, we certainly have some of those essays, and I think they're all very different as well. And I think that that kind of thing definitely helps, because I think a lot of us have this feeling of being different from others or being the odd one out growing up. I think most of us experience that on some level. So that is definitely a very important chapter. And perhaps one of the most important ones is about mortality. And I think that's something that a lot of us deal with. And that's something that's sort of behind a lot of the mental health struggles that we might face on and off through our lives. How do we plan? What do we do? Or some of the things that seem to be normal milestones that come easily for other people are a struggle for us. So how do we live our lives differently? There are many examples of that. And I think that the honesty of the authors is really something amazing about this book. And I wrote the intros to some of the chapters. So it was a bit of a challenge for me to write some of them, because I had to find that place to have been very honest about some of the difficult experiences that I'd had. I hope that it's something that both families and people living with CHD really get a lot out of.
I love this, and I can't wait for the anthology. And I think it goes beyond just the families, too. It's the school environment. It's the people we interact with. It's people at work. I can kind of see this as a roadmap or a guide of some sort to help people understand what it's like to live with CHD. So this is beautiful, and I can't wait. So Megan, you've been a writer and an editor for this anthology. Tell us a little bit about what you learned during the editing process. What was the editing process?
Sure. Well, I had a little bit of experience with editing before, because I'd had a short story published in the past about 13 or 14 years ago. So my story was accepted. I thought, oh, great. And then came the feedback from the editors, and I looked at it and I thought, well, why did they accept it if they hate it so much? There are all these comments all over it, all this feedback. And so for me at that time, not knowing much about the editing process, I just thought all the comments and feedback meant that they didn't like it. And for me, I found that a little bit hard to do for somebody else's work, because you really had to go through the story, and it's all in the name of making a story better and more focused and more readable. But it was something that I found probably as challenging as the writing itself, to really go through these stories, work out what's this all about really, and are there better words, better ways of saying some things while keeping the original author's ideas and voice. And I found that most of the authors were very open to that. I remember early on, one of the first stories I looked at was by Christy Silman. She wrote a story about becoming a pediatric nurse in cardiology. And I talked with her about what the theme of her story was, because I think one thing that I did, and perhaps lots of other authors too, they tried to sort of cram too much into the 1,200 word count. So they wanted to sort of include their life story and tell their story as well. So we went through that and sort of really isolated the theme of what the story was going to be about. And from there, she came up with what I thought was a really strong start and going through the story and a great ending as well. So editing, that was something that was definitely a challenge, to bring the stories down to the word limit and really have a strong story that was wrapped up in a little package by the end.
I'd love that you brought in the authors and brought in the warriors in this editing process, because it is their story and they're close to it. And so being able to do the developmental and the content piece of it in partnership with the author is a really big deal.
Yes, yeah.
So I'm also curious, through the editing process, did you also do any proofreading and line editing, copy editing, or was it strictly more content editing?
It was more to do with the content. And as Anna and I worked on the editing, it was really important to work with the authors as much as possible, because we didn't want to change their words or turn it into something that was no longer their story. So it was more focused on the content, and there are a couple of essays there that were really quite long. We helped them to focus on just one main idea. Like a great example of that would be Monica's essay about Jax, her service dog. When we first received the essay, there was quite a lot of content in the beginning where she was talking about how her previous cat had passed away and how that prompted her searching for a service dog. And Monica worked really hard with us and did an absolutely fantastic job. And in the end, we had quite a tight little essay that was more focused on her and Jax and how they work together. But we do refer back to her cat, Levi, at some point in the story. So he has a place in there too, just as he does in Monica's life. And I love that essay. I think it's great, but I'm a bit biased because I love dogs.
That's very special. I think as editors, it's hard to bring that to a polished finish without losing the author's voice, right? Without losing that tone and that style. So it sounds like you guys were able to do that quite well by working together. And I love that.
Yes, yeah, it's been a long journey, but I think it's been so worth it. And I hope that everyone feels the same way when they read it.
Anna Jaworski has written several books to empower the congenital heart defect, or CHD, community. These books can be found at Amazon.com or at her website, www.babyheartspress.com. Her bestseller is The Heart of a Mother, an anthology of stories written by women for women in the CHD community. Anna's other books, My Brother Needs an Operation, The Heart of a Father and Hypoplastic Left Heart Syndrome, a handbook for parents, will help you understand that you are not alone. Visit babyheartspress.com to find out more.
Heart to Heart with Anna is a presentation of Hearts Unite the Globe and is part of the Hug Podcast Network. Hearts Unite the Globe is a non-profit organization devoted to providing resources to the congenital heart defect community to uplift, empower, and enrich the lives of our community members. If you would like access to free resources pertaining to the CHD community, please visit our website at www.congenitalheartdefects.com for information about CHD, the hospitals that treat children with CHD, summer camps for CHD survivors, and much, much more.
Let's go ahead and bring Anna back into the studio and we can get the two of you together to talk more about this book.
Great. Yeah, I was thinking while you were talking, Megan, I also gave them some exercises that they could practice with us in the group. This was actually really an educational process for all of us. Don't you think, Megan? I put together some worksheets to help the authors understand better what we were looking for. Like she said at the very beginning, I gave them some themes to think about writing from. So this was really a big group effort. Amy, you helped us with some of the editing by pairing with some of the writers and giving them some helpful feedback. In fact, you gave my Heart Warriors some feedback, which I thought was really great. She definitely took it better from you than from me.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, that education process that we went through, I think, was really valuable for those who were able to participate. I think about Alicia and Michael Hills, I remember, were there for a couple of the sessions, and I think their work came out much stronger because of it, and it inspired me as well to go and write another essay. I think the second essay I wrote came out of those education sessions.
Yeah, and I did one-on-one sessions with anybody who wanted a one-on-one session. I would meet with them on Zoom and we would go over their essay and I would help them tighten it up as well. So I think there were lots of different ways. This is why it took 4 years.
Yeah, there was a lot. I remember one of my favorites is editing Brandon Lane Phillips' essay.
Mm-hmm.
And what's funny about his essay is that he wrote it beautifully, but I was envisioning it in a different direction. And I gave him my feedback and then he countered with his own feedback. And then I realized, he's right. So, in this situation, Brandon actually was his own editor and he did a really fantastic job about it.
He did. And I think what's really cool that you just mentioned, Amy, is as an editor coming into another person's writing, you can have a preconceived notion. And it is so valuable to stop and say, wait a minute, do you mean this or did you mean that? And by asking a couple of focused questions, you can help them to see how they can maybe tweak their writing a little bit so that their message is a little bit clearer. And I think that's one of the main goals of an editor is to help the writer to make their points as salient and as clear as possible. Don't you ladies agree?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, let me ask you a question. How do you think this book is going to help other heart parents and families who have a loved one with CHD?
Well, oddly enough, I think the people who will embrace this book the closest are the people who are pregnant with a baby with a heart defect, who have no idea what the future is going to hold for their child and who are looking for some success stories. Now, that doesn't mean that people like me who have an adult with congenital heart defect are not also going to embrace this book, or people like you two ladies who were born with heart defects. I think you all will embrace it yourselves, but I think you all know your stories. And I think parents of adults like me, hopefully they know some stories, although I know that there are lots of parents out there who don't know they're heart warriors. So maybe they don't know some of these fabulous stories. But honestly, I think the people who are going to be the most heavily impacted will be those who are pregnant with a baby with a CHD or have just given birth and their baby's awaiting surgery or had that first surgery. And they're wondering, am I ever going to have a normal life? And what we learn from all these amazing heart warriors is that, yes, you will have a normal life, but you're going to have a new normal for that. It's not your old normal life. It's a new normal life that includes what Megan was talking about. When you go to Egypt, you have to think about your medical insurance, and you may have to plan your day a little bit differently. And I think all of the heart warriors have done such a good job of sharing a slice of their life with us and showing us how it can be so fantastic and normal, which is what we parents are praying for, and yet extraordinary at the same time.
Wow, beautifully said. Thank you, Anna. Megan, what do you think other heart warriors are going to get out of reading this?
Well, I talked about this a little bit before, but I think what is the best thing about this book is that we have different generations represented. So we have people who are in their 20s at the time of writing, right up to in their 50s and 60s. And we also have a lot of diversity in the stories. And one theme that comes up an awful lot throughout the book is finding another way to do something. So we have a section there on physical activity. And for example, Michael Hill's essay, he grew up in Canada and really wanted to play hockey, but was not permitted to because of his heart defect. So he played curling and figure skating and made a career out of sports management to remain involved in sports and participate. And Laurie Hill has a similar story to that as well. We have a story about adoption from Kim Russell. So she was somebody who really wanted to become a mom, but was not able to have children of her own. So she adopted. There are several examples of people changing careers or choosing careers that were slightly different from what they had intended to do growing up. We have stories about people who've moved to different countries. We have stories from authors who've written books about their experiences, showing the value of that for the community. So I hope when people who have heart defects read this book that they'll see ways forward in their lives if they didn't see them before, or they'll see that maybe the path that they want to take really is possible when they've had doctors and others telling them that it may not be. So certainly for my Egypt story, everyone was telling me not to go for a variety of reasons. And I had a really tough time getting insurance because I'm a heart failure patient. But eventually I did find a way and I did get to go and enjoy that trip. So I hope others will see parallels in their lives and see that there's another way to do something that also has meaning and value for them.
I love it. I'm already inspired by what you're talking about. And I think when there's a will, there's a way, and you can find a lot of meaning in your life still by just pivoting. I love the Michael Hill story because he was still able to do something that involved the ice, right? So you couldn't do ice hockey, but he was still doing ice skating and curling. And so, yeah, I can't wait to hear more stories. Anna, I know this has been a huge project because it's been several years in the making. I'm kind of curious to know what's next for you because you've published several books already, including children's books, and you own Baby's Heart Press, and you've got your hug and your podcast. And is there going to be an audiobook in the future? What's next for you?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you asked me that. I just came back from Podcast Movement and I found the recording equipment I need so I can make my first audiobook. So yeah, there is going to be an audiobook. I'm so excited about it. I'll be using a program through the company called Hindenburg. The program that I'll be using is called Narrator. and I can't wait. I'll be signing up for a workshop early in September, and we're sending the book off to the line editor later tonight. And while the book is being line edited, Megan and I are going to learn about narrator and start working on that whole process. So there's always something new to be learned, but the audiobook portion of this project is something I have wanted to do ever since I can remember. When I was a little girl in New Jersey, I remember listening to WABC radio, and there used to be an ad for recordings for the blind and dyslexic. And I remember thinking as a little girl, someday I want to do that. Well, when my children were young and I was a homeschool mom, we actually drove to Austin, Texas for our community service project one semester and learned how to be directors and readers for recording for the blind and dyslexic. So my children actually directed me. I was actually one of the readers, which you've never lived until your children have directed you. I told you, no, Mom, say that over again. Wow. It was actually really, really interesting. And so I've had a chance to see how audiobooks can be put together. But now, as a podcaster, to change gears a little bit and learn about how I can put together my own audiobook, it truly is a dream come true.
I love this. I think we need more of these types of books and projects, because something that you said reminded me back to my college days when I used to read for the blind. And I would sit there in this little room and record textbook after textbook after textbook for the visually impaired. And right now I'm reading a book by Niall Marco. And I don't know if you remember him, but he won America's Top Talent. He's deaf, right? Books like these really brings us into a whole different life. And it creates empathy, it creates understanding and a curiosity. So hurry up. I can't wait. I know it's been 4 years, but it's coming soon, but I just can't wait. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, I can't wait to hear you read your essay, Amy. So Amy is part of the book too, because we haven't mentioned that. Not only did she help with the editing process with some of our authors, but Amy has written an essay. So I can't wait to have you reading your essay as part of the audiobook. I think the most wonderful part about this, Amy, is we have our own little micro community here with our authors, and we feel like family. Don't you think, Megan?
Yeah, definitely. It has become like that. We've got our little Facebook page and we have a few regulars on there.
So Megan, I have a question for you too, and that has to do with your writing. Now that you've had a taste of it with this project and have been really heavily involved with it, do you feel inspired to do more writing?
Yes, I think so, definitely. That was something that I always wanted to do at some point in my life, and I'm getting to a point now where I can sort of become semi-retired. So the plan is to get back into the habit and work that writing muscle to put together some more things. I'm sure that Anna will tell me that the first thing she'd like me to do is to write a memoir about my life. So that's something I'm definitely thinking about, and more fiction too, hopefully. That's something that I really, really want to get into. I've got all these ideas floating around in my head, but they need to become more than just ideas.
That's really exciting. And I'm going to say, get on that too, because for me, my writing process started with just 10 minutes a day, right? Just setting that timer. Yeah, setting that timer, doing 10 minutes a day. And before you know it, that fictional book or that memoir is going to be done, that first draft. And then we've got some editors. Of course, you can't edit your own work, right? That's one of the number one rules. So you got to have someone else edit it.
Yeah.
I think that's all the time that we have today. Thank you so much, Anna and Megan, for being guests today, sharing your information about this book project. I can't wait.
Thank you so much, Amy. We appreciate you interviewing us. This was not going to be an episode where I could interview Megan and she could interview me, as much as having somebody like you come and interview both of us. It's been a lot more fun that way.
Yeah.
It's always fun to be with you ladies. Well, that's all for this week's episode. I've enjoyed being your guest host today. Please come back next week when Anna will be the host again. If you enjoyed this episode of Heart to Heart with Anna, please join the HUG Patreon group. Just go to www.patreon.com/heart-to-heart. And remember, my friends, you are not alone.
Thank you again for joining us this week. We hope you have become inspired and empowered to become an advocate for the congenital heart community. Heart to Heart with Anna with your host, Anna Jaworski, can be heard at any time wherever you get your podcasts. A new episode is released every Tuesday from noon Eastern Time.